Good morning, or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast, or good evening if you're in the other side of the Atlantic. My name is Raghu Kadali, and I'm part of the Solix Technologies team, and I would welcome you all for this webinar, which is titled "Conagra Foods Effectively Minimizes the Chance of Data Breach Within its Fast-Growing Database." So today we actually have the speakers from the conagra Foods, and they have actually gone through this experience of creating the strategy around the data breach, data security, or data masking, and they actually went through the implementation. So I think they're going to walk us through the process, how they have done it, what they have done it, and how they have done it. And I think it's a great learning experience for I'm sure for many of the other companies who are actually looking for these kind of solutions and how they want to implement this solution. So without any further delay, I'm going to pass the control to Tim Patterson, and we'll hear the introductions, and then Tim, you can get started.
Okay. So good afternoon. As Raghu said, my name is Tim Patterson. Lead Enterprise Application Analyst with Conagra Foods. Specifically during the data masking project, and data masking was a project that we undertook as we upgraded our PeopleSoft environment. My role in there was as an application analyst. So as I talk through, and I'll talk through Conagra Foods, what is Conagra Foods, what is data masking, why we did it, and then Linda will take over controls and she'll talk through how we did it. But my role was in that first part that I'm talking through, why we did it and what we did. Okay.
And this is Jenny Powers. At the time, I was the project manager of the PeopleSoft project, so we definitely looked at different things and how we were doing data masking, and now I'm currently manager of the DBA team, so now I'm looking at it from actually a different aspect. So, Linda?
Hi, and I'm Linda Westerhold. I'm a senior DBA. I was the primary technical resource from Conagra's standpoint on the implementation of data masking. So worked with Solix and the project team working on implementing this.
Okay, thanks, Linda. So our agenda, I briefly touched on this, but I'm going to talk through what is Conagra Foods, what's our environment, what are our challenges with data security, what were our approaches, and then Linda's going to take over and talk through results and lessons learned, and then I'll come back and talk about recommendations. So Conagra Foods is one company, we have one goal, and that's making the food you love. And you can see on the bottom of the slide some of our portfolio, but I'll show you a slide that has almost a complete list of our portfolio. So you can see that we were established in the early 1900s. We changed our name 1971. We are a Fortune 500 company. We have about 24,000 employees. And you can see what our net sales were in the last fiscal year. So here's a complete list, almost a complete list of our portfolio. We've had some recent acquisitions that are, not fancy. Give you guys a little bit of time here. Sorry, I'm looking at Jenny's screen as in advance. Can everybody see a list of our brands?
Yes, Tim, we can see.
Yeah, now we can.
Okay. So this screen is a list of our brands. We've had some recent acquisitions that are not in this brand list, but you can see that we're relatively across the whole grocery store and commercial business. So I kind of led into this. We really have two segments of our business: the consumer food segment, which is, think of that as selling to the stores that you go into and buy your food from. So you can see some of the statistics about our consumer foods business. And that portfolio slide that I showed you before is a good representation of our consumer foods business. Our other segment is commercial foods. So on the commercial foods, we're selling to food service, we're selling to restaurants, we're selling to third bullet point down, Lamb Weston produces around 6 billion pounds of potatoes a year. So Conagra Foods is not only committed to their employees, but we're also committed to the communities. And here's some examples of how Conagra Foods is committed to the community. So I'll let you read through those, but we have a big drive on feeding America better, both from producing better foods to helping out with things like Kids Cafe or eliminating child hunger. And we're also committed to excellence, and here's some rewards. Here's some awards and recognitions that kind of show our commitment to excellence. So that's Conagra Foods. So I'm going to talk about the application. As I said in the introductions, we are on PeopleSoft 9.1 Tools 850. We upgraded to that almost a year ago. Completed the upgrade almost a year ago. We run workforce administration, we run North American payroll, and we run base benefits and bid admin in that PeopleSoft environment. We do have self-service, so it's self-service for things like W-4s, View Paycheck, open enrollment. We're running on an Oracle database 11.201, and we're running in a Linux environment on a SUSE 11. Our environment, so when we talk about landscapes, we have a landscape that supports a quarterly release schedule. We have landscapes that support off-cycle releases, things that we put in before or after or during the quarterly release, and a landscape that supports a break fix. And then the organizations that have access to that landscape are what you see below. And when they have access, that means that they both have access within the application, controlled by application security, but they also have access to data for the application through what I like to call backdoors. So direct access to databases, direct access to file systems, direct access to information in our HR system. And then we have the HR business analysts, which have access through the application, and they are in a secured lockdown site, and everybody in there is HIPAA certified. So as far as environment refresh, our strategy is that we copy from production to those environments. So as part of preparation for the quarterly release testing, we'll do a copy of production to that environment. And then from our development environments, we'll copy from production as needed. At least once a year, could be more frequently. So as part of we're actively involved in a tools upgrade right now. So as part of the tools upgrade, we'll be refreshing the development environment. Data ownership. So PeopleSoft is the owner of a lot of data. So what's important from an asking perspective is we are PeopleSoft is the owner of benefits enrollment and then the interfaces to the vendors for who's enrolled, who's participating. We're the owner of personal information. A lot of that personal information and company information is part of the identity data. And our identity data drives what we see as an organization in Active Directory, what's passed as the employee population or user population to ERPs like SAP. It's passed to our system for our badging, so all of our locations are secured access locations, and that who we are is driven by what's in PeopleSoft to badge in and out of our locations. And it's also a source of truth to start the procurement process for both IDs and email. And then, of course, we're running North American payroll, so it's also a source of our payroll data. There's a diagram that shows our 10-box landscape. I left the demo environment off of here, but you can see that top left-hand corner, dev is our development environment. It migrates to QA and alt, so this is our release environment. So during release testing, we do some testing in QA, we do some testing in alt, but it eventually migrates from QA to production. at the end of the release, when the release is scheduled to go up to production. Our PSV environment is what's used for off-cycle and break fix. So the development's done in PSV and it's retrofitted in dev so it can go through the release testing. But then it's tested in FUT, Alt2, or Sandbox, depending on what it is, before it goes to production, what cycle and what it is. So if it's an off release or a break fix. Typically break fix runs through Alt2, where off releases we use FUT and Sandbox for off releases. So when we talk about data security, we run a application security controls quarterly against our production environment. So that control is validating who has access. It's validating when we come through in the application. It's validating that we have the right roles and the right segregation of duty for those roles. When we talk about the backdoor, it's just a validation and sign-off from management that who has access to the backdoor is appropriate. And this is only in our production environment. There are no application security controls in our test and development environment. So there's our risk. We aren't validating that the right people have the right access and that they're properly trained. We are legally required to protect personal identifiable information, PII. You'll see me reference it as PII going forward. And then there's a moral. What we found out, Jenny and I found out early on in this project, is there's a moral obligation. Some people are have a stronger view on how morally obligated we are to protect sensitive information. And to give you a sense of what's the difference between sensitive information and PII, think of SI like comp, like performance evaluation, like that stuff where I may not want Jenny to know that, but legally as a company, we're not responsible to protect me from Jenny seeing that information. Or a social security number, and that particular item, we have a legal obligation to protect that. So it's important to understand that difference, and as lessons learned, you'll see that was very important for us to understand that difference. So what is data masking? When we talk about data masking, we're basically taking the values of data and we're changing the values of data. We want to confuse somebody coming in and seeing that data so that they understand if they try to use it, it's not real data. Does it solve our security issues? It does not. We still have to do security controls. You'll see in some other slides that we still have some needs to test with non-mask data, but it's going to minimize our risk. It doesn't solve all our problems. So it will provide a level of security for those environments that we have less stringent controls on. And data masking is not data encryption. So as we entered this project, what were some of our options that we considered? Well, first of all, doing nothing was not an option. We've had a repeat audit finding for the last several years on this particular issue of PII information being exposed in our lower landscapes, our non-prod landscape. We did consider an option of locking down security controls for all our non-prod landscape. That added a level of overhead for both support of break fix, support of performance problems, support of release development, and support of testing. So it just put more rigors around managing PII and SI. And we also thought about building something versus buying something. We had some internal data scrambling scripts that we've used here and there for other things, and we thought about going through the process of using those. So our strategy for masking, first of all, was to create a list of PII and SI. from that list, we did a legal review. We got an opinion from legal on what is PII and what are we legally responsible for doing with sensitive information. We got a business owner review of those, of that data, and got their position specifically on sensitive information. So it was our business owners, was HR saying we had to protect that sensitive information to the support staff that would have access to it in a lower environment. We also did an identification of downstream impacts. So what are the systems that are consuming PII and SI? So if we scramble it or if we mask it, what do we need to consider in our testing for those downstream systems? So after all those reviews, what we determined was PII was what was necessary to mask and not sensitive information. Sensitive information we were going to manage through policy. We also, in our strategy, understood that we have some interfaces that would require non-mask data. As an example, I said that we interface with our benefit vendors. Well, a lot of our benefit vendors' unique key is Social Security number, so we couldn't change Social Security number or the testing would completely fail when we sent it to the vendor, testing of a change to an interface. But what we've done is we said that non-mask environments will go under the same security controls as production. So not our entire lower landscape is under the same security controls, just the non-mask landscape. So the data masking project. We focused on data in our PeopleSoft environment. So we mask it in the PeopleSoft environment, in the testing and the integration with our downstream systems. The mask data goes in there, and then it would be masked in there. So PeopleSoft as the owner, mask it there, downstream gets masked. The masking did not impact production, and we had to reiterate this over and over to all of our constituents that would be using lower landscape. The non-prod databases that were impacted, everything's masked but alt and alt 2. Alt and alt 2 is where we do testing that would require about the actual Social Security number type of employee. And as we defined our rules, we prefer to randomly generate data versus shuffling data. So specifically, we masked Social Security number and bank account number. We randomly generated Social Security number and bank account number. And Linda will talk through how we did that and the challenges on that. But then on date of birth, we shuffled that. And the reason we decided to shuffle date of birth is we wanted a valid birth date, and the best way to apply to ensure that we had a valid birth date was just to use the birth dates that we had in the system and just shuffle them all over the place. So I'll let Linda speak from here.
Okay. So the rules for data masking, and we're just going to focus on the three, which is the Social Security number, or in PeopleSoft, it's also referenced in a number of different ways, like NID, national ID, and bank account number and birthday. So this slide here shows a sample of the requirements that can be used to randomly generate Social Security number. And we opted to work with Solix to create an algorithm that generates random values in PeopleSoft where PeopleSoft is able to view as valid when they run their edit rules. So PeopleSoft's application does some additional validation against the data, which a lot of applications will do in their fields. And Social Security number has a set of rules they have to follow, so Solix created this algorithm for us. So what they did was Solix provides a number of masking algorithms, and they also partner with Oracle and provide the OEM masking definition. And so that makes porting between Solix and OEM feasible, because OEM, and what OEM is an Oracle Enterprise Manager that we use to actually apply the data masking templates. So because Solix partners with Oracle, they follow and utilize their masking definitions so that we can take the templates over to OEM. if you want to go to the next one, I think. I don't think I can forward these slides. Okay, so yeah, so this is the installation and setup of Solix. So Solix application we did purchase, and what it is, it's a standalone application that provides masking templates and functionality, or it can be used as what we call a bolt-on to Oracle's Enterprise Manager's data masking solution. So before installing and configuring Solix, we had to know what our business requirements for masking were. So we worked with our business partners and gathered a list of columns or fields that we needed to mask the data and determine what type of masking definition to apply to that data. So masking definitions are security rules such as shuffling data or valid SSN that we saw on the prior slide, or random number or random value generation. So in Solix, the application, you have to create what they call a knowledge base. And that knowledge base houses the setup and requirements that we gathered from our business partners and associates that with tables and fields in our initial PeopleSoft database. So the AJ45 is a user that is created by Solix, and that user created by Solix is in the source target that we're going to use for each future application of the masking template. And then once we associate the source target, we needed to register the tables. So our source target is a PeopleSoft Dev database. So we're going to register the PeopleSoft Dev database tables in Solix's Enterprise Data Management solution. So Solix application, basically. And then we're going to populate the columns and primary keys of the PeopleSoft table definitions that we pulled from the source target and Solix. And then Solix can apply the entity relationships that ties the masking rules to all the column references. So the parent-child relationships, that was the key driver for us to get with Solix, to get the Solix application, because they had those relationships built in their application that we did not have provided for us by OEM Grid. And then the last steps on the Solix side is we generate an XML file that we then export from Solix, and then we import that into the OEM Grid, and we use that for future masking of PeopleSoft data. Next one. And basically the process that we follow at Conagra Foods is what Tim had covered, and that was, we have a business requirement that have to do different testing on open enrollment. So we refresh a non-prod database, and we'll say dev for this example. Once we refresh the database, then you have to create that Solix user, because the masking templates are ran as that user in the database we just refreshed. And then once we created that, there's a couple different ways that we can then use the XML templates that we ported over from Solix. And the first way is we can do an import from Solix, and that's a feature in OEM that allows you to import XML templates and use them for data masking. And then once you've imported that and established that in your OEM Grid for databases, then you no longer have to do the import and a couple little tweaks. You can just do a create as, and you can then mask another database. So even though we've done the import just for dev, once that mask is created in dev, now all I have to do is say create as, and now I can mask QA, I can mask, well, not all, because we don't mask all, but our validation systems or our practice systems. And then you can go to the next slide. And then once the XML is imported, so now we've got the XML from Solix sitting in OEM. So there's a few steps we have to take before we can actually apply this to mask the data. And the first is on a new import, we had to update the database information. If our original import happens to be for dev, you can take that XML file from Solix, you can manually update that information for QA. Or, like I said in the previous one, you can do a save as or create as. The second step you do is once you've got that associated with that template and your database, you then need to generate a script. And that script is housed and created in OEM. So when you generate a script, and you can't kind of see underneath status, I don't know, I should have zoomed in a little bit, but underneath the status you can see a script was not generated for the one that happens to be highlighted there. So once you create that script, there's an impact report that's generated. And it's very important to check the impact report because that will tell you when the script runs, if it's missing anything, if you need to increase your table space size, user permissions, whatever it might be. That impact report is key to a successful run of your data masking. And then once you've reviewed your impact report, then you can schedule your job. And like any job in OEM, you can schedule the masking job to run later. Say your users want to get in there right away. You can schedule the job to run after 5 o'clock and it'll kick off. And the key to scheduling these jobs, and I'll kind of touch on this later, is not to run them concurrently. And then you can go to the next slide. Okay, so we purchased the data masking pack in OEM. And what Solix also supplies is, I believe you can use Solix to do your data masking, but since we had already purchased the data masking pack for OEM, and Solix was the key to giving us those relationships. So in OEM, there's your management pack access. So because we do not want to apply data masking to production or alt, if we do not check or apply the data masking pack to alt or prod, you cannot use data masking and have someone accidentally mask your alt or heaven forbid your production data. If you don't have that license applied, OEM will prohibit you from running data masking in that database. So that's kind of one area that we kind of put a security against accidents happening for data masking, anything we didn't want masked. And then you can go to the next slide. Okay, so for our lessons learned, our testing change management. On this project, we had to make sure to work through our functional and technical teams so that they knew how to validate the results with the mass data. And we also had to work with the extended teams to test interfacing systems so to make sure that they were also addressed during testing. And that's really important so that they understand, one, what they're looking for and what they're testing. They're not only testing the process that the data is working, they're also testing, did the masking change the data, and is it still functional? And then in the process, make sure you have, if you are building scripts, there are some common scripts that we run each time we do a refresh. And what that does is the common build scripts were created for reusability and ongoing refresh and masking processes. So when we documented the process, we noted where the scripts were located in a common shared directory. So, across our team, the members on our team, other DBAs, could also perform data masking. And the common scripts are used for creating or recreating users like the AJ45 that Solix needs to migrate over the templates and the table spaces for that user. And those are needed in the masking process. And the next key point is backing up your data before data masking and throughout the masking process. So restarting data masking in OEM in the middle of a failed masking process is not feasible. There is not a restart that I have found. So what Oracle's recommendation was just back it up and do a point in time or a flashback recovery if you have flashback turned on. So we do that before the masking, and then we also do an intermediate one because we have one really long masking process that runs. We back it up before that as well, and then back it up afterwards, so that when the teams run their testing, if they want to get back to the point in time of the post-mass data, you've got a good solid restore point. The impact reports that are created when you generate masking definitions, very, very, very important to read those impact reports. OEM does a pretty thorough job of testing and looking through, what could potentially be needed when this runs. So pay careful attention to all the information and all the pages of the report, because there are sometimes multiple pages, and the way OEM presents them, it's sometimes difficult to see that. And the last item is the concurrent masking jobs. We had ran a few tests, and running masking jobs concurrently, what we saw was they tend to run longer, and when you try to kick off multiple jobs at once, because they create a lot of database locks. So masking in OEM locks some of the same tables, whether you're running, multiple data mass applications. So it was quicker for us just to run a single threaded mask that finished in a few seconds than to kick 2 or 3 of them off and have them run and lock each other out for an hour. So that was a pretty good lesson learned for us, is that running them sequentially actually ran a lot faster because we had no locks in the database versus running concurrently. And you go to the next one. And validating results. So how did we know that we had mass data? So verifying your data was masked can be done by both the functional and the technical teams. So have both teams run through scenarios of known data and check the values that are masked, and also verify functionality of the system, that it's intact with the masked data. And they can just, run queries, they can get an application, visual inspections by both sides, and lay out like any good process, your testing documents, what they plan to run through, what their expectations are, and where they met. And then review any error logs. So the error logs that are created during the masking process that follows the completion of the script being applied to your data. So if you see any logs, obviously, then something went awry, and it'll tell you, did it finish or not? And do you need to flash back? Do you need to recover? Do you need to reapply this? And once again, you cannot restart in OEM. There is no restart that we found functionality of applying this mask. And then the last results, you could just run basic queries on your tables that were masked to review the mask fields and checking some known values to determine if the masking process provided expected results. And the next one. I think it's kind of hanging on. Mine just came up. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So why did we use Solix EDMS data masking? The huge benefit for us that we got from Solix was the simplification of the entity relationship mapping of the PeopleSoft tables. There was we did some cost analysis and some hours and quite a bit of number crunching. What we found was what Solix provides in the mapping of the data for PeopleSoft was quite a bit more beneficial for us to purchase that than to even try it internally with even interns or our resources. it was nice. It was simple, and their solution is pretty complete. And anything that we found that had been lacking, Solix was very quick to resolve that. And it's the application, once it's set up and configured, is relatively, I mean, it's simple to maintain. The initial setup and configuration, it takes some time, but after you've got that set up, it's very low maintenance. And Solix has a large commitment to Oracle. They partnered with them very nicely. The ease of portability between the Solix application and their data masking utility in OEM Grid was very nice and easy to use. They're a partner with software to facilitate management of metadata through their knowledge base. So again, what we didn't have, they had provided for us in their knowledge base of their application. And OEM, or Oracle Enterprise Manager, is a tool that we use, the DBA team uses daily in our staff, and we use it for monitoring our databases, for reporting, for alerting, managing, security. The whole, tool set of OEM is phenomenal. And since we use it on a daily basis, that was one that all the DBAs were real familiar with. So it was nice that we could take from Solix that mapping and port it over into OEM, where we all were on a level ground in using it. And the Solix consulting team, again, they were very, very great. They engaged during our implementation and worked with us, and very quick to respond to any issues that had come up during that time.
So as a final recommendation, and I stated this at the beginning, make sure you develop policies around PII and SI. What are you going to do as an organization to protect that information? Set policies, socialize those policies across business owners and IT. Because data masking is an effective component for a security strategy. If you've got personal identifiable information in your lower landscapes, masking is an effective way to protect yourself against breach of that information. And partnering with the vendor, as Linda was talking about, is a cost-effective way to get your ERDs, to implement, to grow your knowledge so that you're self-supportive once the solution is implemented.
Thanks, Tim, Jenny, and Linda. I think that was like a lot of great information, and I think the audience whom we have, I think I'm sure they appreciated that as well. I think the whole model of how we went through the whole process and what you did exactly, and then what are the different benefits, benefit analysis. I think that's absolutely great information. I had a couple of questions that came through on the private chat on that, and I did actually hear these questions before as well. I think the key, I think the primary one question is like you talked, Tim, about one of the options, was like a build versus buy thing. So the question was more, I think, in that realm where I think, could you have actually done it with like a custom scripts or a manual scripts versus actually, going through like a vendor provided solution or a combination of solution? So what is the big, impact or difference from doing it on a custom model versus, going back to your build versus buy? Maybe if you can share some thoughts around that, I'm sure that'll be, people would appreciate that.
Sure, I'll start, but I'll let Linda and Jenny jump in. I think the biggest thing we bought out of this was when Linda was talking about the ERD, the mapping exercise. If we had to build it, that intellectual property that we bought from Solix that had that mapping already defined for us, and that was probably upwards to 80 to 90% done to what we needed. we would have had to invest the time to build that. And Linda talked about we could have hired interns, we could have done it ourselves. Excuse me. There was a lot of time. We anticipated a lot of time to build out that intellectual property. So that's why we chose to go with the buy versus build type of process. Linda, Jenny, anything to add?
Yeah, and I was pretty excited when I first saw the Oracle's data masking, because what I had understood about it was that it would go out into the database and find those relationships. And after we had used it and questioned Oracle about it, we came to learn that because of the way some of the applications are built, the relationships are not built at the database level. So those relationships are housed in the application. Well, their tool will not find it unless it's built and housed in the database itself. So that's where we were our hands were tied, because also the diagrams that they provided were not 100% usable. And so Solix provided all the relationships and all the mappings that we needed. So if we told them we wanted to mask Social Security number, they found all the relationships where data existed in the PeopleSoft application, and the parent-child relationships were built in their application. That tied the data masking together for us, and then we could port that over and apply it to PeopleSoft and OEM.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Tim. I think that's very useful information for people who are trying to embark onto this implementation and so forth. So the other question I got here is, I think probably a little different one, but the question was more for like a custom database applications. And the question was like, have you done any work on doing data masking on custom database applications? And if so, what is the usefulness of a data discovery tool which would sort of go and because I think some of the custom database applications, people may not be sure where the PII or SI kind of information is. Would a data discovery tool help? And if so, do you have any recommendations around that model?
Linda, do you want to talk to this question?
Yeah, because Solix was part of our implementation team, we actually do have customized tables and built in PeopleSoft a couple, I don't know if you'd call them sub-applications that we built, but they went through our entire implementation, and during the implementation, we worked with them on the customized tables to identify which ones did need to be masked and which ones needed to be excluded from that. So they did work with us on the customized tables, or you could call them mini applications within PeopleSoft that we built in-house.
Okay. So any other questions from the people on the line still? Any questions for Tim, Jenny, or Linda? I think we have a couple of minutes.
I have a question. This is Mike Woida from IPG. You mentioned three of the data items that you mapped: Social Security number, bank account, birthday. I'm assuming that was the entire list that you did. Can you share either the number or what other items you masked?
That's the entire, Mike. First of all, Mike, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Mike and I go back. Mike used to be a conagra, and we go back 10 years. So.
Yeah, for this old home week.
Yeah.
Oh, is that Jane?
Hi, guys.
Hi there.
We got the original PeopleSoft implementation team on the phone.
Yeah, we do.
Outstanding. Actually, Mike, we started with a bigger list than that. So our list included some of the sensitive information, like name, email address, our LAN ID, as a few of them that we were trying to hide that sensitive information by disconnecting the record that had compensation and performance, disconnecting that from the identity. But we found that to be too big a downstream effort. And that's why we got the policies all around sensitive information. So We started with a bigger list, Mike, but we ended up with just those three items. The idea being PII is a collection of information. It's a collection of name, date of birth, social security number, I think address is in there too. But it's a collection of those, so collected together would reveal identity. But name and address are public information. So if we could disconnect a couple components of that set of PII, then we could basically protect personal identifiable information. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So,
That's the things we're struggling with how many items do you have.
yeah, so it's, when you look at PII, it's really a set of information. If you can change a couple components of that, so social security number, date of birth, it's going to protect that personal identifiable information.
And Linda, you mentioned that you'd done quite a bit of analysis on the amount of time that it would take you to do it without Solix. Can you share kind of what you found as far as possible? Sure.
Well, it's been a while, but we're up there. I mean, I don't even think we had a few months with a few different people that could have mapped it. Yeah. Because of the sheer number of tables in PeopleSoft, we had actually started down that path. And Jane, I don't know if you remember, years ago, we actually had some scripts that we ran, that we implemented to mask some data, but they didn't even touch every single table because we didn't have all the relationships down, and we even had their ERD there being PeopleSoft, their diagrams. So.
And remember that ERD, PeopleSoft's ERD works off at the component level. So if you got to identify all the components, then you got to go into that component to pull up ERD and expand it out and start understanding all the connections.
Right. What we're seeing is that you have to expand it to about 3,200% of the size just to, of course, for reading it.
Yeah. And once you expand that, they're still laying on top of each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we opened up an SRS Oracle, and they said that's what they had. They didn't. In a future release, maybe it would be fixed, but it wasn't fixed.
Well, and the nice thing about Solix and the engagement with us is what we discovered and learned I mentioned, alluded to 80 to 90% of what we needed. Well, that 10 or 20% that we added in, it adds into Solix knowledge database for future customers to use. So you get a benefit of our lessons learned.
So now, one more question. So you kind of touched on it, I think, but how do you handle new development as far as modifying the scripts that you already have? You know, somebody builds a new table that's got one of these items. How do you roll that in?
Well, you could probably handle it a few different ways. Since we now own, or not own, but we have the license for Solix. We have their repository. When we open up that database, pull it back into Solix, we can then map that in Solix if we choose to do it there, depending on the breadth of numbers of tables. Or you could just go to PeopleSoft into Oracle and OEM and do another data masking definition there. There's just options. Once you own Solix, or once you've licensed Solix, why we wouldn't house it in there, I couldn't think of a reason. But I mean, if it's just like one field was added, I don't know if and they wanted it ASAP, I don't know if I'd go through the process of pulling it into Solix, regenerating the scripts and building the relationships there when I could just add it. Depends on the amount of changes.
And Mike, if we were to have a customization where we're building a new table where social security number would be a primary key or social security number would be a data item of it, our design quality checks would catch that PII information is being exposed on new people, and then we'd engage with Jenny's team to get that added to the Solix definition.
Right. That was my next question. You have to be pretty well tied on to what they're developing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And the biggest slowdown in the entire process actually is when it hits the OEM data masking side of it. That's where it runs the longest. I mean, once you set up your initial configuration and mapping and everything up to the point you're generating the XML files in Solix, I mean, that's pretty much a done deal. It's, you know, the initial setup's going to take you a while in Solix to begin with. But after that, everything is just, it's up to how fast Oracle data masking applies the mask.
Okay. So how long, what was the project duration then when you brought Solix in? How long did that take you?
Well, the project was really the whole project of us upgrading our PeopleSoft, and Solix was a part of that.
I want to say the Solix engagement, maybe Regu, you remember, but the Solix engagement, I want to say was 6 to 10 weeks, somewhere in that time frame.
Yeah,
But I think we were only involved though for like that 1 week where we set it up, right? Where they were in-house after we'd given them all our information.
Yeah.
And we had to set up all the configuration. It was probably just a week we were tied up with Solix.
Yeah. So you rolled it into your overall upgrade project, so.
Right.
Good. Okay, so it wasn't separate. Okay.
So have you had the experience, you haven't then, if you did it with your upgrade, but I guess I'm curious if maybe this question to the Solix group then, how quickly after PeopleSoft releases a patch or an upgrade that adds new relationships to those keys, how quickly do you release an upgrade to your mapping?
Yes, sir, this is Raghu from Solix team. So typically, I mean, we, as Tim and the team mentioned, so we do work pretty closely with Oracle and the different applications group. Typically it's like any release that comes out, I think we are probably like a 4 weeks time on our side to get the knowledge base, or what we call the metadata repository, updated with the newer set of things. I mean, whether it could be a new module, a complete new module, or it could be upgrades to an existing module. So, but in general, I think that time would be, I would say, 4 weeks in our development cycle. All right, I think we are pretty much close to on top of the hour, and Tim, Jenny, Linda, thank you so much for the taking time and putting together this slides and sharing the information with the rest of the community, and talking through some of the detailed points. We really appreciate you